So once you find, you need to understand, once you find a property that meets all your needs, there ain't like there's 10 other ones that can meet your needs. You can't, quite literally, real estate is the only thing they're not making more of. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, however you may be listening. It's your boy T. Shees, data scientist, social commentator, and getter of buckets. At least I think I can still get buckets. I'm old. I can't really dunk anymore. Last time I dunked a basketball was probably a couple of years ago. Life comes at you fast. Anyway, but I'm coming back at you. I'm so excited. Because I said yesterday, for the ones of you who watched my video, my I'm Back video yesterday, I told you that 2023 is the year we produce more content than we ever have produced. So I am on a roll, 2 days in a row, just getting after it. And what are we talking about today? How about the Southside Blind Guides? Who are the Southside Blind Guides? Well, actually, they're the Southside Rabbi, or rabbis as they call themselves. This is Ameen Hudson and KB HGA, KB Christian Rapper Extraordinaire. They have a little team, a little duo where they do a podcast called the Southside Rabbis. But, you know, I've listened to their content in great depth, and for several years I've been kind of taking it in. And you know what I can honestly say is that Blind Guides is actually a more apropos title than rabbis. You say that's a little spicy, that's pejorative. You're kind of making fun of their name and calling them names. Hey, listen, I don't like to do it. I don't take pleasure in it. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I am trying to accurately describe the content of their commentary as it relates to race, politics, and culture. And I believe, as Jesus said, when the blind lead the blind, you'll end up in the ditch. And I think that if you follow and you take into account and you take to heart the perspective that Ameen and KB have on those particular issues, you'll be in a ditch. So I think it's appropriate to call them the Southside Blind Guides. Now, what is the specific issue that brought these gentlemen back to my attention? Well, every so often I'm on the Twitter box, which I probably shouldn't because Twitter seems to be where all the dumb opinions are aggregated. Some good ones, but I feel like I spend too much time reading things that I disagree with. But once again, Ameen is on the Twitter box saying silly things worthy of the title of the Blind Guide. So I want to read that for you, and I want to talk about it because, once again, he's talking about race and culture. Now, just for context here, Ameen is definitely who I would call someone who is woke, right? Him and KB, they're victims of the woke mind virus. I'm praying that these guys will come back to their senses. But just for as a quick example here, here's what he has pinned at the top of his Twitter profile. He says, "Racism isn't a touchy topic if you're not a racist." Oh, so profound. So profound. Thank you for sharing that, Ameen. It's complete nonsense, of course. But what I say about racism is that if you're a person that thinks racism is everywhere, you'll find it, whether it's there or not. And that, to me, is typical of the way they approach their issues on race and culture. But let's get into this tweet, okay? Because I want you to understand why I find this so egregious. He says, this is the tweet here. Had a friend, fellow black man, that tried to sell his brand new home. He has several properties. And had all kinds of folks that were interested, but after they visited, they didn't bite. He took down all his pics and let a white man show the house, and it sold immediately. That's the tweet. And this is apparently a retweet also, or a quote tweet of this person named Dr. A. He says, just finished de-blacking my home and having a trusted low melanated neighbor walk through with the appraiser. Waiting to see what it sells for. Stay tuned. Okay, so here's the deal. It's so typical. It's so typical because, like I said before, when you're the sort of person that believes that racism is ubiquitous and everywhere, you find it even where there is none. And even though I call these guys the Southside blind guides, I thought this, even by their standards, was a pretty low, kind of a, if I can say it this way, kind of a low IQ comment and tweet to make, because this is there's so many reasons why this doesn't even reach the threshold of anecdotal. This doesn't even. So I've said this. I always start my cast this way, where I say I'm a data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. But data scientist is a real thing. So I work with data and I understand what we call inference, right? How do you establish causality? And a lot of times, basically in data science, the main thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to establish causality. We're trying to say, okay, here's this phenomena we observe. What's causing it? And to what degree of confidence can we say that this is the causal determinant of that phenomenon? And we have all types of statistical, mathematical tests and a lot of rigorous approaches and methods in order to distill whether or not there's a causal relationship between the thing that we are trying to understand and the factors that we feel like play into it. And, sometimes we can say that some things are directionally true, right? We can say, well, we can't say with a high degree of certainty that this thing is causing it. We can't say with any kind of certainty, but we can say that it seems to at least be correlative or it may be directionally true. And so we can't establish the causal relationship between the two things, but we can say that there's certainly a relationship between these two factors, but to what degree we cannot say. This doesn't even reach that threshold. This barely reaches the threshold of speculation. Okay, let's talk about all the things we'd have to do in order to establish any sort of veracity about this idiotic claim. And I use strong language here, like idiotic, because I think that these sorts of opinions ought to be treated with the disrespect they deserve. This is important because when I read the Bible, this is something that the scripture says. It says, 6 things the Lord hates and 7 are an abomination to him. And one of those things that the Bible says the Lord hates is a person who sows discord among the brethren, a person who stirs up strife. And I think that's precisely what these guys are doing when they make these baseless claims for which there's exactly zero evidence that they're anything close to being true. All they are doing is reflecting their own biases and projecting their own, to put it frankly, diseased thinking, and trying to pass that off as some sort of cogent analysis. It's not. So let's talk about what would have to be the case in order for anything like this to be true. Okay, what's the underlying assumption here? The assumption is this guy is black and white people, because they're racist, they don't want to buy his house. Now let's think about that now. It's one thing. I mean, as I think about that, I just gotta say, I hate to use a strong language like this, but it's literally the stupidest thing. I mean, how does it make any sense that a white person would see your property and recognize that it's valuable and exactly the sort of home they would love to live in or invest in, but then pass on it because black people used to own it? What are you going to live in it with it? Are you going to be a tenant in the basement? Listen, I told you guys yesterday, if you saw my video, you should go check it out. This is a new home. I live in a new home. We just bought this home in October. This house right now, even though we still have a lot of work to do on it, it looks so different than what it did when we bought it. There are precisely zero traces of the previous owners. You know how often we give thought to the people who used to live in this house? Absolutely zero. Do you know how hard it is? I don't know if you've ever bought a house, but this is the second home we've owned. The first home we bought, we built it. Kind of a starter home, but it's a beautiful home. We loved it, and we lived there for like 14 years. And it was just right for us. But in this home, we had very, very specific needs. In the first home, we just needed a house. It needed to be very general. We wanted 3 bedrooms. It had 2 bathrooms, yada, yada, all the basics or whatever. But this house had very specific things that we wanted. In our last house, the backyard was completely terrible. It was like the slope went down like that. It was just awful. And the backyard was almost unusable. So we couldn't play out there. The kids couldn't play out there. We had a big backyard, but it was because of the slope. It made it unusable in many ways. So we had to have. That was one of the criteria. The backyard has to be flat and it has to be gorgeous. We weren't going to compromise on that. We weren't going to get another backyard that was unusable. Our outdoor space in this house is beautiful. And I got to tell you, we walked into a lot of homes that we absolutely loved, but the backyard wasn't right, so we passed on it. If you can hear it in my voice, I'm kind of getting over some sickness here, but so that was just one of much of the criteria that we had. The home had to be a great backyard, great outdoor space. It needed an office, which is the space that I'm in now. It had to have an extra room, not a bedroom that we can convert into an office, but something that could be an office, and we still have 4 bedrooms. So that's another thing. We needed to have an extra bathroom, right? So we had 2 bathrooms. We needed to have another full bath so that it could be easier for us to get ready. This home ended up having that and even a little bit more than we needed. And the basement needed to be a nice finished basement. We weren't going to go into a situation where we had to finish the basement because it took us forever to finish the basement in our first home. So once you need to understand, once you find a property that meets all your needs, there ain't like there's 10 other ones that can meet your needs. You can't, quite literally, real estate is the only thing they're not making more of. You can go to the store and there's always going to be another, electronic device, and there's always going to be another, this and another that. But you know what? Real estate is real estate. God made all this ever going to be right in the first 6 days of creation. That's it. You cannot afford to be super picky when you find a property that meets all your needs. There ain't 10 of them just like it. They're all different. So when Ameen puts out this literally idiotic statement, I'm just trying to contextualize for you how silly and how absurd it is, and how committed to this false narrative of everything is racist you have to be to make such a not even anecdotal statement. This doesn't even rise to the level of speculation. This is just Ameen projecting his own diseased thinking. So let's talk about this. The first thing that came to mind when he said he took down all the pics, let a white man show it, and the house sold immediately. The first thing that came to my mind is, would you ever try to open a spaghetti jar? You try to open a spaghetti jar and you turn it, you turn it, and then it doesn't open. And then you hand it to somebody else and they go, it pops off, right? It's super easy right away. The truth of the matter is that before you handed that over, you basically loosened it up. It was right on the verge of opening. All that effort you put into trying to open it before it actually opened. Now the next person just grabbed it and opened it, and now it just opened right up. That's exactly what this reminded me of. I don't know if this guy knows this, but the longer a house is on the market, the more likely it is to sell. That's how that works. He has no idea, and ironically, he doesn't put any details on here. I don't know how long it took to sell the house. How long was it on the market before he made those changes? Was it 2 weeks? It used to be, if you go back, like say 9 months ago, people put their houses on the market. There were so many bids and so many offers that your house would sell in the same day. Oftentimes, people paying over asking price. That's how hot the real estate market was, at least here in Omaha, where I live. 9 months ago, that's what it was. When we sold our home this fall, it had slowed down quite a bit. And it actually took us about a week to sell our home, which in today's standards and the market standards over the last couple of years, that's actually a long time. But if you go back 2-3 years before COVID, that was, your house was on the market 2-3 weeks. That was not uncommon. So the question is, what was the market conditions? How long did he have the house on the market before it actually sold? Because the longer you have it on the market, the more likely it is to be sold. So that's why I feel it's like somebody trying to open a spaghetti jar. You're sitting there twisting. It doesn't work. You give it to the next person. They pop it right off. Well, that's because you've been working on it for like the last 30 seconds. In order for this to be valid, and here's my data science brain coming into the fold. In order for this to be valid, what would have to happen is that you'd have to put several properties on the market at the same time. The only difference between them would have to be white pictures of white people up in the home, and pictures of black people up in the home. That's the only difference. So if you're going to establish causality, you have to isolate the variable of the thing that you're trying to demonstrate the impact of. Otherwise, you're just talking nonsense, as this gentleman is accustomed to, and sowing discord amongst the brethren while he does it, thinking he's some purveyor of justice. So it wouldn't even be valid if you took 2 properties and you said, all right, the only difference between property A and property B is pictures of white people up on the walls, pictures of black people up on the walls. Then we'll see which one sells first. And when I say the only difference, that's almost impossible because every real estate property is different. So you see how absurd this becomes? There are no 2 identical real estate properties. So what you would need is you'd need to do that experiment over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's what you need to do. Otherwise, you're just speaking into the air. And then you would need to show, hey, if pictures had black people up in there, they sold, 10%, slower than the white people. And therefore we can, there hasn't even been any studies to this effect, because the next thing, and this is interesting, and I'll see if I can find it and I'll try to post it. But a real estate agent actually made a post. Let me see if I can find it here. Let's see here. Here he goes. Realtor here. He says, I can speak for the mindset of those buyers that didn't bite. I says, I can't speak for the mindset of those buyers that didn't bite. But general rule of thumb for prepping a house prior to listing on the market is to depersonalize any house, which includes all races. So that's the next thing that came to my mind. I said, wait a second. I happen to know, because I just sold my home, of course, one of the cardinal rules for staging your home is to take your personal pictures down. You know why? Because when somebody is coming to buy a house, they don't want to see you in it. They want to see themselves in it. If when they come to the house, if it feels like somebody else's house, that's not good. They want it to feel like their house. So depersonalizing your house is a key component of selling any home. It's a turnoff for any prospective buyer if your house is highly personalized and has pictures of your family up. That's not a new concept. People who've been selling real estate have understood that for years. So here's this guy complaining that he had black pictures up in his house, not even understanding apparently. And this was so idiotic about the whole thing. You're talking about this guy got several properties? Is this guy supposed to be some sort of real estate mogul? Because that seems like a pretty common sense and fairly well-known fact about selling real estate. I even know that I'm not a real estate pro. So I'm saying, what's this guy talking about? So not only is he talking dadgum nonsense, because he's doesn't even seem to understand that depersonalizing your home is one of the most important things you need to do in order to make it more attractive for prospective buyers. But he's making an idiotic claim about the fact that they didn't want to buy it because they saw that the pictures up in the house were pictures of black people. Completely asinine. Finally, we don't even have any idea how the house was staged. He said, I got my less melanated guy to sell it. Did they stage it? Did they restage it? Because I'm going to tell you right now, how you stage your home has a lot to do with how it sells. If you don't stage it well, it doesn't matter how good the property is. Oftentimes people are turned off by it. All details he left out, conveniently, might I add. And this is the point that I'm making. The point that I want to make is guys like Ameen, in my opinion, aren't interested in the truth. If he would have took just 30 seconds to stop and really think about what he was implying and what the potential other reasons could have been that could have explained the thing that he was talking about, the phenomenon he was exploring. Oh, racist white people don't want to buy black people's houses. This sort of ignorance, I'm telling you, friends, we need to treat this stuff with the disrespect it deserves. These people, the people who say this stuff, they don't deserve our respect. They don't deserve it. I say that with as much passion as I can muster. And we need to learn when to move on and when to dismiss this drivel. Because all they're doing is stoking. It's so easy and so sloppy and simple to accuse a bunch of nameless, faceless people of horrible bigotry and racism. It's lazy and convenient because you don't have to point to anyone in particular, but you do it enough and it just puts this. You have this air of, or this malaise of distrust in the air, in the atmosphere, in the culture. It's just a kind of a tension and uneasiness. Every time you see white people, you're suspicious of them, and then white people become suspicious of black people, and that sort of thing, that kind of barrier between us, breaking down those barriers and coming together and getting to know each other as people. So easy, so much easier and so lazy. We can just make all of these assumptions about people we don't know and make these anecdotal claims that are barely even anecdotal, but seem to confirm our biases and our own ignorance. It's easy. And I want to ask you, if you're listening, that you don't do that. Let's learn. Let's learn how to avoid that. And let's learn how to do the godly thing. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love thinks no evil. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love gives people the benefit of the doubt, if I can put it that way. Not stoke suspicions of racism when you have precisely zero basis to do so. That's all I wanted to say, friends. Let's treat this nonsense with the disrespect that it deserves. And let's not let the blind guides and others of his ilk make us distrustful and cynical about the world around us. Till next time, friends, God bless you.